Hello and welcome to ABP Live. I have with me today Mr. Ashish Kundra. He's currently the Principal Secretary in the Delhi government, but at the same time, he's been an enthusiast in the Northeast who has served there for almost 8 years. He's come up with a new book, Resurgent Northeast Narratives of Change. We know very well how important the Northeast is for India, be it strategically, be it culturally, be it from the civilizational point of view. Welcome to ABP Live, Ashish, and thank you so much for your
Thank you very
time.
much.
So let's just start with the book. I know your inspiration has been the way you've served there and how you amalgamated with the society there. So what are some of the key takeaways that you could find out? Essentially, being the Delhi boy that you are. We've always heard that Northeast feels disconnected from the mainland. They feel that, they're not part of us. But what were your thoughts?
Well, I served in the Northeast over a span of 15 years. So the 8 years was broken down into two spells.
Okay.
And I think the inspiration primarily for writing this book was that I saw a transformation,
Mm-hmm.
both in the economic infrastructure, but also in the people's attitude towards the mainland.
Mm-hmm.
There is now undeniably a sense of integration, and which is very complete. And there is an aspiration amongst the youth that they want to be part of India's growth story.
Okay.
They are mobile, they want economic opportunity, and they are also looking at investment opportunities in the state. So it's a major shift. Land and people which were hitherto emotionally disconnected with the rest of India are suddenly finding themselves striking a chord with the mainland.
Mm-hmm. But when you say this transformational change that is coming within the youth, what exactly are the driving factors for that, you think?
So there are several driving factors. I think one key factor, of course, is education. Second is technology, because in the digital age that we live in, everybody is connected, and you cannot have an isolationist framework. The third is I feel that even the government's approach towards the Northeast as a strategic frontier has changed, and you will be reading about the Northeast far more than you have ever been earlier. And central ministers, they have been given a mandate actually to travel to one northeastern state or the other every month.
Okay.
And it comes out in the social media. There are tweets by ministers and all. So it's a mix of factors which has contributed towards this change. But also, let's remember that this is a Northeast which was also alienated, and the younger generation has moved on from what was. So it is a new generation that you are dealing with, and this is the aspirational Northeast that we're talking about.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's interesting. But having said that, one also is sort of forced to think what happened to, what is the status or probably what is the youth thinking of the past in the sense, the insurgencies that we talk about. Even now, we are seeing, as we speak, the violence that is going on in Manipur that the government has brought tremendously under control. And also, when it comes to, again, Nagaland and all, we see the rebel groups are still very much operating. Some of our neighboring countries are also named in that, especially, particularly Myanmar. So, how is that scenario right now?
See, the incidents in Manipur are hugely unfortunate, and it is violence which is stoked by some vested interest groups who have played along the insecurities of economic opportunity and jobs, and the divide which has been, let us say, there's been a harmonious coexistence between the hill tribes and the plain people, and they have tried to incite passions through driving on the economic insecurity.
Right.
But I'm pretty confident that people of the region and the state will have the maturity, because that state has seen so much of violence in the past, and there has been such a heavy presence of the armed forces that there were protests, if you remember, at some stage against the imposition of the Armed Force Special Power Act.
Right.
That people have moved on. So I am pretty sure this was a passing phase, and it will normalize, because the aspiration of the youth is so strong that violence will not be accepted. When you talk of Nagaland also started off, let's remember, with the goal of seceding from India. And from there, it has moved on enormously. When you travel across the state, talk to the young entrepreneurs, talk to women, talk to anybody who wants to do something in life, they are now tired of violence. And therefore, everyone is yearning for a respectful settlement in the larger framework of the Constitution. So, the Constitution is inviolable, as has been also mentioned by the central government. But people also realize that. So I'm pretty sure that whatever the fractured remnants of insurgency which remain in Nagaland is also a passing phase which we'll see fade out in the next few years.
Interesting you say that, but at the same time, we see that, the ethnicities there are very deep. And the fact that we always have, whenever we speak of Northeast, there is this feeling that infrastructure development is hugely required. And we also know the kind of, direct or indirect influence China has. We'll come to that. But when you talk about, the aspirational factor of the youth and the fact that how once AFSPA was very much the sort of discord between the center and the Northeast. What is the status, do you think, today? Do you think the infrastructure development is happening and that needs to, speed up? What are your thoughts?
So connectivity was the Achilles heel of the Northeast in a way. So there were no roads, no bridges, and there were hardly, I think, 2 or 3 airports. We can easily say 15 years ago. Now each state has at least one functional civilian airport which connects them to Guwahati, Calcutta, and Delhi. So the connectivity is the first bridge between the mainland and that region. Within that region, for example, I worked in Arunachal barely 5-6 years ago. I have seen in that phase a major transformation. Parts of the state were disconnected from the other because of the tributaries of Brahmaputra, and now those have been bridged. And people within the region are able to travel far more easily than they used to. Yes, there is going to be a much greater focus, I'm sure, in the coming years on strengthening this connectivity and infrastructure, which will help in further bridging this divide.
But do you think all these foreign policy initiatives that we see, which also started, many years back, the Look East policy, now the Act East policy, also entangled with it is the neighborhood first. Has all this helped the Northeast per se?
I would say it has been a mixed bag. So some parts of Manipur have benefited from this. The other land corridor which was there was from Mizoram, which has seen very tepid progress. But now with the inland waterways which are connecting through Bangladesh, there is going to be definitely a boost in economic activity. Very recently, I saw that the Sitwe port has been inaugurated, and the inland waterway through Paletwa and coming through Mizoram will provide again a parallel economic activity. Now similar, if you look at the infrastructure which has been created in China, in Yunnan province, linking with Myanmar.
Right.
If we are able to improve the road connectivity between Guwahati and Mandalay, I think it can be a game changer.
So, coming to the fact that, you've been in Arunachal Pradesh for a pretty long time. Now, we hear all these things since the standoff with China started in 2020, that some parts have been taken over. The Chinese easily come inside Tawang and then they go out. What is the reality? You've been there, you've seen it.
No, I think it's a bit of some speculative narrative. First of all, let me set the ground very clear. Arunachal, everyone is a Hindi-speaking citizen.
Okay.
And there is absolutely no affinity with China. So I have traveled to the remotest corners along the Tibetan plateau, and everyone is the Indianness is very firmly embedded there. You go to a playground, school, everyone is into this business. They start their day with the national anthem and all that. So it's a very strong, and maybe a prolonged presence of army over a period of time has also perhaps instilled this feeling of Indianness. Then there are, of course, the educational institutions, the Vivekananda Foundation institutions, Ramakrishna Mission institutions. So that entire network has also kind of helped. So there is no ambiguity that people of Arunachal are very clearly, Indian, very strongly Indian, very proud about their Indianness. And sitting from Delhi, it might appear that if China has named some cities,
Yes.
that has no meaning.
And they do it on a regular basis.
I mean, doing it on paper has no meaning. I mean, people, if there's no resonance of the citizens with the Chinese discourse, it has no meaning.
So you mean to say there is no influence of the Chinese at all there?
Not at all. Not at all.
And what about Tawang and all?
No, even Tawang. I have traveled to the remotest parts of Tawang district. I have traveled to Bumla border, and beyond along the border. And each of these settlements, the same sentiment prevails. The binding factor in Arunachal Pradesh is Hindi. And culturally also it's a Buddhist state, Buddhist district. I mean, not the state, but the district is Buddhist. So they are very clear in their minds that in spite of whatever narrative is sought to be built by China, they're very proud Indians.
Okay. Well, that's interesting. Now, coming back to your book, your first chapter says Nehru's misplaced Utopia. Now, would you like to shed some light for our viewers as to what exactly do you mean? Do you mean to say that we've been handling the Northeast probably incorrectly since we gained independence?
Well, I won't entirely say that. I would say that Nehru's approach to the Northeast was guided by a gentleman called Verrier Elvin, and he had a certain philosophical approach of development of Northeast, which was premised on this thought that the people of the Northeast have a unique cultural ethos, and let us not impose our sense of civilization on them.
Okay.
And let them be. So let them live their lives because they are content, and let's not spoil their, let us say, happiness by an artificial imposition. And that led to a bit of a laissez-faire, and there were limited investments over time. Infrastructure was not built, and so on. And the winds of change which swept across India, in a way, Northeast was left out of the growth story completely.
Right, exactly.
And the fact that technology is a huge disruptor. So the isolationist approach can never work. In fact, Verrier Elvin himself, during the later years of his life, he revised his own theory and admitted there was a course correction. And he said that he overturned the original Panchsheel of Nehru and brought a altogether diametrically opposite premise on a more balanced approach towards development. So I think now, things are changing, and I think the pace of change which we'll see in the coming years will be very rapid.
But in one of your other chapters, you also talk about In Search of ShangriLa. What exactly you mean by that?
So, Northeast is one of the prettiest parts of the country. In fact, when you travel to Arunachal, that is truly my favorite place. And I have been saying this to a lot of friends that while Srinagar is, in the popular imagination, is kind of positioned as God's gift to humanity. But I would say that there are parts of Arunachal Pradesh which are so pristine that they have a very celestial kind of feel to it. When you reach there, the air is so pure, and you see meadows, and you see wild ponies, and you see lakes and waterfalls and rhododendrons in the wild. It is a spectacle to behold. And I think such pristine beauty, such lush forests in those lands, it is something which people of the mainland must visit. And it is very sad that, sitting in Delhi, people very fashionably talk about their travels to Vietnam, to other parts of Southeast Asia, while they know so little about the Northeast.
True.
and in their own backyard there is such beauty which is hidden. That's why I devoted one chapter on the more touristy cultural part of Northeast.
But then also, again, that brings to the fact that the infrastructure development has been so, the connectivity has been lacking, which is why probably, people don't really go there and prefer it as a tourist destination. But do you think the environmental and the natural beauty that you talked about, that needs to be preserved, and probably it should not be that, in the zeal of developing Northeast, we bring more industries and investments there.
Yeah, so first of all, industry.
It's a kind of a dichotomy.
No, the balance between environment and tourism can be struck very easily. And there are very fine examples of how it is being done in places like Sikkim. Outside of the forest reserve, local communities have built homestays.
Right.
And local people are acting as guides for tourists to go inside the sacred reserves and so on. So the idea is not to say that Northeast will be like Goa. We are not talking about mass tourism. We are talking about experiential tourism, perhaps modeled on Bhutan.
Okay.
So Bhutan has struck that kind of.
But then there are
balance.
certain red lines.
So fine. So I think it is a slow opening up of immersive experiential tourism, which is in which the Northeast presents its cultural identity and also its wealth of its forest reserves and natural beauty for people of India.
Now, Ashish, coming back to the fact on how we saw in February 2021, the coup happened in Myanmar that led to the influx of, refugees to such a large extent. And we know the borders there are very porous. Right now, the junta is carrying out airstrikes. So how do you think the government will be handling that, especially when there is this rising demand that the AFSPA also needs to go, which is rightly so. But how do you see this balancing act happening?
You see, the borders which were in a way drawn by cartographers at that point in time were very artificial constructs over very porous lands.
Right.
And if you look at Myanmar and Mizoram, for instance, the communities on the other side in the Chin state and the ethnic Zo community on this side, they have the same stock. In fact, when I was there at that time, the chief minister of the Chin state was a Mizo. And the ties of ethnicity are so strong.
Right.
And the informality of their economic exchange. So the formal trade might be low, but the informal economic activity is there. So there is a free movement regime which allows you to go inside each other's territory for a certain distance. But the fact of the matter is, certain times the relatives of people are living as far as Mandalay, and they travel all the way without a visa.
Absolutely.
To Mandalay. So that's how it is. So when all such disturbances happen across the border, the refugees naturally come over to Mizoram, and the Mizos, because of, for them, ethnic bonds
are
far stronger than anything else, and they give them shelter, and with the hope that once things stabilize across the border, they'll then go back. So it is a very natural phenomena which we cannot look at it from one simple construct.
But then the insurgents also take advantage of this.
Not really. I mean, from whatever I've seen the last few years, not so much the insurgents, but it is the refugees who are affected by the violence on the other side of the borders.
Okay. Now, Ashish, you've been also with the Ministry of Commerce and Industry. You've seen in and out, how India's trade policy shaped up over the years and how this has now gone to another level. Yeah. But when it comes to the Northeast, do you think, projects like the Kaladan multimodal project, which is, under which this port got inaugurated. And also, there's this plan going on for last almost, I think, 10, 15 years to have a trilateral highway through the Northeast and directly connect Kolkata with Mandalay and probably then Napito and then Thailand. Do you think these are realistic ideas? Will they ever see the light of the day? I mean, for the Northeast, how important it is?
See, geographically, the Northeast is far more proximate to let us say Myanmar and then across Thailand and all these places than let us say to Gujarat.
Correct.
So if you look at it that way, so any impetus to infrastructure and connectivity which is able to allow movement of goods and people freely and without any impediments across the borders will definitely boost economic activity. But there are certain things which will need to kind of go in for that to happen. Infrastructure, of course, is one very crucial ingredient. But we need to invest in local capacities for trade.
Okay.
So, transacting foreign trade, it's not as straightforward. You need to have some training in, first of all, you have to have an understanding what is the demand on the other side.
Correct.
What is it that you can send there? Not necessarily what is produced there, but even when you source it from the mainland and send it, what are the requirements? Then there are certain regulations of foreign trade which are, related with DGFT and all that. So some kind of capacity building.
And there used to be border huts and all.
Border huts has a degree of informality to it, but high volume, medium volume, real transactions can happen only through a very formalized trade arrangement across the integrated checkposts.
Now, Ashish, lastly, the book really sort of catches attention when you talk about the governance challenge. You have captured all factors in it, but then what really for you stands out as the most important challenge that this government has to face in order to develop the Northeast or for the future governments as well?
Yeah, so, the constituent states of the Northeast are small entities, most of them. And each of them is trying to shape their own economic agenda. But in order to take that to scale, there has to be a sense of regional planning in certain areas. For example, development of tourist circuits.
Okay.
Somebody who's traveling to Arunachal can also combine places in Assam and Meghalaya and then go there. Combining even with Bhutan is possible. Similarly, on the other side of the Northeast, let's talk about horticulture. So, horticulture, getting the produce out of the states and to the mainland needs investment in cold chains, warehouses, and so on and so forth, which should be planned on a regional basis, so that there is a optimization of resource and a more efficient way of moving out stuff from the Northeast, which can be exported. Third thing which I would say is hydropower. So all three need a very regional look at things, and that's why I have mentioned at one place that there's an institution called the Northeastern Council, which perhaps if it is revitalized like Niti Aayog and becomes a regional think tank and oversees economic activity in that region, it will surely help.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. That was Mr. Ashish Kundra. He's the author of the book. Let me show this again, A Resurgent Northeast. I hope you enjoyed this discussion. For ABP Live, this is Nayanima Basu.